There's a reason machines like this don't exist anymore, but it's probably not the reason you think. Because when you first look at something like this, it doesn't seem that unusual. It's just a combination machine, a bandsaw, a table saw, a jointer, and a couple of other tools, all built into one frame. But the more time you spend looking at it, the more something starts to feel off. Not because it's complicated, but because of how far they were willing to go. And once you start flipping through the rest of this 1918 Crescent Woodworking Machinery catalog, you realize this wasn't an exception. Every single machine they made followed the same idea. Nothing here is simplified or scaled back. These weren't designed to be lightweight, or easy to move, or even easy to use. They were designed to do one thing, and that was to perform as physically well as possible. And they didn't really care what it took to get there. And as we flip through these pages, the first thing that stands out is all of the massive heavy-duty cast iron. And it only gets bigger and heavier as the catalog goes on. You're looking at a time when men worked shoulder to shoulder with massive exposed gears, spinning flat belts, and heavy iron that didn't forgive a single mistake. This was not a catalog for hobbyists picking up tools for a weekend project. This was a catalog for factories, for production shops, for pattern makers and millwrights who needed to move serious wood, fast, all day long. Crescent manufactured a massive lineup of machines that covered everything that a serious production shop could ever need. They truly delivered for their customers, from towering 38-inch heavy bandsaws to complex tilting angle bandsaws and their legendary, chaotic Universal Woodworking machine, which we'll see later in this catalog. They had the engineering capabilities to outfit an entire factory floor with the most cutting-edge technology of the era. And they achieved this because they did something that modern manufacturers simply don't do anymore. They kept asking themselves, how much further can we push this? How much more can one machine do? How can we maximize the value of a single heavy-duty cast iron frame for our customers? They were building an empire of heavy-duty machinery, and in doing so, they may have built some of the most capable, and let's be honest, some of the most terrifying woodworking machines ever produced. Not terrifying because they were necessarily unsafe, but because of their sheer power. If you look closely at the engineering in this catalog, it's obvious these machines were built like absolute tanks, but designed to be precision performers. Crescent proudly stated that their main frames were cast in one single piece and cored out hollow throughout. This maximized stability and rigidity, while also minimizing material waste. They even purposely arched the base of the castings, so the heavy machines would sit dead flat on an uneven shop floor without any tendency to rock. They were pouring heavy, massive tool bases and frameworks focused on the utmost strength, rigidity, and durability in every single detail. But these weren't just built to be rugged, they were high-speed performers. These saws were capable of running at terrifying speeds. But Crescent explicitly tested and listed the exact correct speed for best results, so the craftsman could balance extremely fast cutting with the longevity of the blade. Now, when you look at these spinning flat belts and massive exposed gears, it's really easy to assume safety was just a total afterthought. But by 1918 standards, Crescent was actually trying to protect the working man. They engineered pressed steel fenders to completely cover the side and front edge of their bandsaw blades. They specifically designed these guards to prevent a guy from getting his hat or his head caught in the saw when he had to bend down close to the table for accurate curve work. However, the brutal reality of the 1918 woodshop was that a lot of these safety features, like the round wheel guards, the hinge guards, and the iron enclosing doors, were actually listed as extra equipment. So, while Crescent absolutely had the genius to design the safety gear, making sure you went home with all 10 of your fingers was ultimately an optional upgrade that cost you extra. And the deeper you go into this catalog, the harder it is to find a single compromise anywhere. Even the machines that seem relatively straightforward are built to a standard that feels completely out of place today. And by the time you get to some of the more specialized equipment on the following pages, it becomes pretty clear. But the result is a collection of massive, exposed gears, flying belts, and swinging blades that demanded absolute respect from anyone brave enough to stand in front of them. This is where the catalog goes from heavy-duty to downright terrifying. These machines were built to maximize production and utilize every single ounce of belt-driven horsepower. Just look at their variety woodworker. This single cast iron footprint was engineered to be a mechanical chameleon. It could be set up as a saw table, a borer, a hollow chisel mortiser, a pole rounder, a disc grinder, or even a hand-feed molder. It was incredibly capable, allowing a small shop to do the work of a half dozen different machines without taking up the floor space. But then flip over to the planer and matcher, and you see the true danger of the era. It features a variable friction feed with a massive, exposed network of gears, flat belts, and pulleys hanging right off the side of the machine. It could thickness heavy timber all day long, but one slip of the hand near that labyrinth of moving iron and your career as a woodworker was permanently over. And if you want to see a machine that really makes you sweat, in a few pages we'll get to take a look at their swing cut-off saw. Instead of safely pushing wood through a flat table like you see here, this heavy iron frame was bolted directly to your ceiling or mounted on a wall bracket. It suspended a massive unguarded circular saw blade right at chest height. To make a cut, the operator physically grabbed a handle and pulled that screaming blade directly toward his own body. Sure, Crescent proudly noted in the catalog that the hanger was proportioned so the saw would safely swing back out of the way when released by the operator. But the sheer nerve required to yank a giant, exposed blade toward your torso all day long is something modern woodworkers just don't have to think about. But all of that completely pales in comparison to the absolute masterpiece of early 1900s mechanical engineering that we see here, the Crescent Universal Woodworker. This wasn't just a machine, it was an entire factory floor bolted to a single cast iron base. Crescent miraculously crammed a bandsaw, a jointer, a saw table, a borer, and a reversible single spindle shaper, all into one single, terrifying unit. And if you purchase the right specialty attachments, this machine could also be adaptable as a resaw, hand-feed molder, tenioner, panel raiser, pole rounder, disc grinder, knife grinder, plane grinder, and hollow chisel mortiser. But that's not even the most wild part. Not only did they make it possible to fit all of these machines into a single frame, but they also designed it so that all of the core functions could be used in unison. The catalog explicitly boasts that 5 men can work on the machine at one time without interfering with each other. Just look at the illustration that we saw showing 5 guys wearing aprons, crowded shoulder to shoulder, feeding wood into 5 different spinning blades and cutters simultaneously. And this wasn't like modern combination machines that require changing of components and setup time, and the ability to only use one function at once. You could bounce between the different functions of this machine effortlessly, and a simple pulling of a lever would engage the pulleys to turn on each machine, without the need to turn on or off any motors. Every single section of the machine is driven by a chaotic series of flat belts, starting from a single motor or a mainline shaft hidden in the base. It was the ultimate space-saving, money-making powerhouse for a small shop, but it was undeniably the most dangerous mechanical traffic jam they could possibly invent. It's a testament to Crescent's engineering genius that they could even make this beast function, and it was just further proof of just how far they were willing to take things by the fact that they actually put this machine into production. They weren't designed to be affordable. They weren't designed to be convenient. They were designed to be as capable, as precise, as repairable, and as permanent as possible. And that's where things start to shift. Because at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, why don't we build things like this anymore? They didn't disappear because they failed. They disappeared because nothing like this could be built the same way anymore. By today's standards, they were too expensive, too overbuilt, and too uncompromising. They were built for performance first, and everything else second. And today, that kind of thinking just doesn't survive in a mass market. But the good news is that while they are getting harder to find, these machines are still out there, waiting to be restored and put back into use. Now, I'm not suggesting you go buy a Universal Woodworker or a swing saw, but if you come across a big Crescent bandsaw, or one of their heavy cast iron jointers sitting covered in dust in the corner of a barn, you should buy it. Once you clean off a century of rust and maybe retrofit it with a modern electric motor, you'll have a machine that cuts truer and runs smoother than almost anything you can buy brand new today. These standalone machines were built to be the bulletproof, beating heart of a professional pattern shop. And they still have decades and even centuries of life left in them. So save the heavy iron and keep the history alive. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing for more vintage tool history posted every week. And let me know if there's another vintage tool catalog that you'd like to see featured next.